Hello, and welcome to the third installment of Inspiration Friday, presented to you by Metz and Mateo. I am Mateo, your host again, and we are going to continue speaking about happenstance. It's a topic I've been discussing for the last several weeks this month, and we have today and next week, and I'll wrap up next week. And as we've been discussing happenstance, I realized that they may not be the correct term. I believe serendipity may be a better term to describe the chance events that happen in the work that I've been discussing and the things that have been happening to myself. And anyway, happenstance is, I guess, more of a global term for chance happenings or events, where serendipity is when chance happening events are more interesting or valuable. And so we're going to continue discussing serendipity, and in particular in relation to the work of Cindy Sherman. Cindy Sherman is a photographer, female photographer, who got her start in the late 1970s, and her first body of work is called Untitled Film Stills, and almost all of the images were taken between 1977 and 1980. In 1977, she moved from Buffalo, where she was going to college, and then she moved to New York, and that's where she started taking these first images. MOMA acquired the complete collection of 69 images in 1995, and I believe she added a 70th image in the late 90s, early 2000s. And MOMA put out a book in 2003, The Complete Untitled Film Stills of Cindy Sherman. They're all black and white. And while I was in art school, I did a assignment. We were told to create a piece of work based on an artist image. And so I took one of her film stills and recreated it in a video. Unfortunately, I do have the video, but it was done on an old 3.4 megapixel camera, and the quality is horrendous, but someday I might dig it out and put it on our YouTube channel. But tonight I'm going to go through some of selected film stills and read excerpts from her book. This book was put together again by MoMA and in cooperation with her, and she wrote several pages within the book and also selected in which sequence the images are in the book, which is not in chronological order. And I highly recommend it. To have the whole collection together, I think, is important to see it as a whole, which is why the museum purchased the entire collection together, because they thought it was incredibly important to see it as an entire body of work instead of just individual pieces. I personally don't take pictures of people, and I'm not particularly a fan of her subject matter, but I'm really a fan of how she created what she did, like her techniques. And in the book she writes about sort of her story of beginnings, of how she kind of fell into doing this type of work, and all the different chance happenings that came about and created the look and feel of the photographs. And that's really what drew me to the Untitled Film Stills. From MoMA's website, Cindy Sherman's Untitled Film Stills is a suite of 70 black and white photographs in which the artist posed in the guises of various generic female film characters, among them ingenue, working girl, vamp, and lonely housewife. Staged to resemble scenes from 1950s and 60s Hollywood, film noir, B-movies, and European art house films, the printed images mimic in format, scale, and quality the often staged stills used to promote films. By photographing herself in such roles, Sherman inserts herself into a dialogue about stereotypical portrayals of women. Whether she was the one to release the camera's shutter or not, She is considered the author of the photographs. However, the works in Untitled Film Stills are not considered self-portraits. Now I'm going to read some excerpts from the book itself. So this is all written by Cindy Sherman. Just before I came to New York, I was making cutouts, elaborate paper dolls that I'd assemble into narrative tableau. I dress as different female and male characters, pose, photograph myself, print the photo at the scale it was to be in the tableau, cut out the figure, and use it in little scenarios, including this picture here. I thought this work was too feminine with the dolls and the cutting, and it seemed contrived and girly. Then when I moved to New York in the summer of 1977, she stopped by David Sal's studio. David worked for some kind of magazine that used photographs in a storyboard format, like a photo comic book or novella, and I remember seeing piles of the photographs scattered around. I don't know if he was doing the layout or what. They were quasi-soft porn, cheesecakey things, and it was hard to figure out what was going on in any of them. They were totally ambiguous, and I just loved that. This kind of imagery would solve my problem of trying to imply a story without involving other people. Just suggesting them outside the frame, something clicked. And that, to me, is such an important story of how when you're in these artistic communities of people who are being creative, you can just wander into someone's studio or apartment or in a conversation at a restaurant, and different things will come up that will stimulate you, or again, like in her problem, sort of solve a problem that her friend David had no idea that she needed fixed, but that she just happened upon it. And what happened if she didn't go to his studio and never saw these pictures? She may have gone a different route and may never have developed the film stills to begin with. I had friends who worked at Barnes & Noble who would bring home cheap film books. Barnes & Noble had millions of books about the movies, whole books on Garbo, Eastern European film, silent film, horror films, film fads. These books were my textbooks, my research, and of course I was only interested in the pictures. Yet again, here is Cindy getting inspiration from something a friend brought to her that she didn't even know she needed. And incidentally, this is the image. This is Untitled Film Still number 13. And I used this image as my inspiration for the video I did. This has a somewhat Brigitte Bardot kind of influence. None of the film still characters was a particular stretch because I never knew what I was setting out to do. It wasn't like I had these visions in my head that I had to realize. What a fantastic quote from Cindy Sherman. This is Film Still Untitled number 16. And this is Untitled Film Still number 4. Cindy says, I wanted those first 6 shots to look cheesy, so I deliberately used warmer chemicals in the darkroom to make the film reticulate, which gives it a sort of crackling, grainy look. I didn't care much about the print quality. The photographs were supposed to look like they cost 50 cents. So needless to say, I wasn't using the zone system for perfect exposure. One reason I was interested in photography was to get away from the preciousness of the art object. A paradoxical result, much to my subsequent printer's chagrin, is that many of the pieces are very tricky to print, with a lot of burning, dodging, and so on. But for me, those effects were serendipitous. Back then, I was doing the printing myself, and I didn't mind spending hours in the darkroom working away at revealing what I wanted from the negatives. Oddly enough, I still tried to capture some kind of mood that I suppose only a decent print can have, but they were far from perfect negatives. During one of the shoots with my father, I had just bought a telephoto lens and was setting it up for the first time. Its weight made the camera droop on the tripod, pointing at the ground, and when he raised it up again, it went out of focus, which is why number 38, of a character wading through a stream, is blurred, like a pictorialist photograph. I liked it like that. I love chance. In number 40, I'm playing with a little cat that just wandered by. It's the only shot with the cat. Number 41 is one of the surviving pictures from 4 rolls of film that I accidentally screwed up in the darkroom when the top of the film can floated off in the developing bath. That's why it has that hazy look. Number 39 is the same. I lost a lot of pictures, but it was worth the accidents. What an appropriate comment from Cindy Sherman. It was worth the accidents. And we'll wrap up the slideshow with Untitled Film Still number 96, which is color work that she did after the black and white series. My niece, Barbara Foster, also took some photos when I was visiting my sister on that same trip. I was hanging out at the pool and I handed her the camera. At some point, I accidentally loaded a roll of color film, so there's one roll of color shots. I didn't like them at the time because they looked too real, too contemporary. I like them now, perhaps because they've faded and have their own truly vintage color, washed out and purplish. I really like that in Cindy's work, she not only allowed chance to happen, but she fostered it. And she realized when it was happening, how important it is, how that serendipity was such a vital, integral part of not only this film series, but I believe in all of her work since. And it's just, again, an excellent lesson that I keep coming back to in this series about how important it is to be open to all of these random chances and opportunities in our lives. And it's just something that I think it's important for all of us to remind ourselves at times when things seem to always be going wrong, that there may be an opportunity in there that we're ignoring, or that maybe we just need to walk away and come back, give it some time and see something with fresh eyes. So if you enjoyed this video, I hope you share it with friends. Join me next week where I am actually going to show some of my work. It's a current project that I'm working on. I started it last year, and it was all based on an image that was a complete mistake. It was something that happened on a roll of film. I have no idea where it came from, and now it has spawned an entire series, and I can't wait to show it to you. So see you next Friday.